And our main event is Justin Howard, and he's the co-founder and technical director of Blue Billboard. And well, first, I just want to say shout out to Jeremy. Jeremy, thank you so much for introducing me to Justin, for introducing Justin to the forums, and Justin, thank you so much for agreeing to come and give us this talk. I'll let you introduce your topic, and I'm ready for you to take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of, let me see if I can share my screen first. That'd be good. Here's the keynote. I'll give you a little bit of background on me first. I'm actually a software engineer by profession, and Jeremy has already used my experience there to help him with an API thing recently. So I've been doing that for probably about 15, 20 years, predominantly working with JavaScript. I had a full head of hair before I started writing JavaScript, and now I'm as bald as a billiard ball because it can be quite a tricky language. I've worked with a lot of blue chip customers over the years, and the most recent one was Citibank or Citigroup. So that's been my experience, you know, working from an engineering background rather than solely data, but obviously data plays a big part of, you know, being a developer. So yeah, and then about 2 years ago, well, basically my best mate owns a company in Brighton that produces a content management system for digital signage. And about 2 years ago, he asked if I would join him on a new venture to build an advertising platform that would run on top of his digital signage CMS software. And for some ridiculous reason, I agreed, and I've regretted it ever since. No, not really, but it's been a lot of hard work to you know, to get it out there. But you'll see it in a bit. It is live. It's up and running. I'm using it with Blue Billboard, and it works brilliantly. And then that kind of got me thinking about a year ago. I was like, do you know what? I don't see a lot of signage about in Sussex. Now, you do see it in some places, you know, and it tends to be larger chains, maybe like Asda's and supermarket chains like that. Occasionally convenience stores. You might have seen it at a post office and, you know, some other places, but it's not really that widespread, particularly small format. I mean, large format, there is a bit more about now, but small format, I sort of thought, you know what, there's a bit of a gap here, particularly in the independent space. So again, I made a ludicrous decision to start a new business in the middle of the pandemic. So we are actually a year old now, and that's where Blue Billboard came from. So yeah, founded it a year ago with myself and my business partner, David. He's actually a builder, so he has no idea about the technical side of things, but he puts the screens up on the walls and makes them look nice. We've got 25 screens out across Sussex at the moment. If that isn't out of date, it is still 25. But for next week, we've got another 5 going up next week. So that'll take us to 30 screens. Ours are small format, so they're 32-inch or 43-inch screen size. So if you imagine that as a TV, it's kind of that sort of size. And what we're doing is really carving out our niche in the independent business space. So this area is kind of quite underrepresented in terms of digital signage. And the thing with digital signage, of course, is that it's more environmentally friendly than printing stuff all the time. And you know, and the problem is you print something and it's immediately out of date. So whereas obviously with our stuff, you know, the businesses are able to put, you know, things out really within 5 minutes. You know, they can upload it to the CMS and within 5 minutes it's on the display. And what we're trying to do is really help these independent businesses get into the digital signage world and start sort of making use of it. We've got a variety of business types. So gyms, we've got quite a few gyms. I don't know if anyone's over in the Worthing area have heard of Guild Care. We're now rolling out signage across their entire estate. They're actually the second biggest employer after the NHS in the Worthing area, so they're pretty big. And particularly in the healthcare and elder care sort of arena. So we're rolling out quite a few things there. We've also got then a number of barber shops and then some random things like we've got a sweet shop in Hove. We've got a screen in their window there on Blatchington Road. So if you're ever in that area, go and have a look and you can see our screen there. We've also got like a convenience store in Brighton, a repair garage. Yeah, lots of different sort of locations really. Yeah, I mean, I say we're certainly using market leading technology, not on all sides of it. I mean, Zebo, which is the CMS we use, it's not market leading, but it's a very popular CMS because it's quite cheap. I use it because it's my best mate's company. So if something goes wrong, I just message him and get him to fix it. But also it is actually quite simple to use. It's effective, it's powerful. It's actually quite easy for me to sort of manage. With the AI stuff, which we're going to talk about in a bit, we are definitely using a market leading solution there. And I'm quite excited to sort of talk about that a bit later on. The network at the moment is getting around 250,000 impressions a month. I obviously want that to be higher, but that's pretty good when you think we've only been running for a year and that's only across 25 screens. And that's actually 17 locations. So we're doing pretty well, but my target is to get us to between 1 and 2 million impressions a month by kind of the end of Q2 next year. So that's kind of the, one of the short-term objectives really. We should be at 50 screens by the end of this year, all being well, touch wood. So that's basically a bit about me and a bit about the company. Here's a picture of some of our screens, or some pictures, I should say. So the bigger picture here, this is Lanes Health Club in Rustington. They're quite a big location, swimming pool, gym, beauty salon, various things like that. And these screens are pretty much in the reception area. This one up here in the top right corner is Eastbourne Borough Football Club and a really gormless Harry Kane, which I thought I'd leave in because he does look really gormless in that picture. But this is Eastbourne Borough Football Club. And then underneath here is one of our most recent ones, one of the Guildcare locations in their head office in Worthing. So this kind of gives you an idea of what our screens look like. These are all the 43-inch screens, and obviously landscape and portrait orientation, we cover both of those. So talking about data and how, obviously, so we sell advertising on here. So data is obviously important for us because customers kind of want to know, who sees our screens, how many people see them, and what sort of demographics they get. And, when you look at the online sort of data, I guess, the things you've got there are sort of like, platform registrations. You can get data off people that way, OAuth integrations, if you've got any of those, cookies, app tracking, mailing lists. There are other spurious sources out there. This is the sort of the online data space, but there's a lot of kind of stuff, I guess, changing in this world at the moment, which I guess a lot of you will be familiar with. Privacy being the kind of main thing, really, right? So, Apple are obviously trying to push that quite a bit. I know Google are doing the same. There are changes in the way cookies will operate or work. App tracking is becoming obviously very difficult to do, particularly on iOS. I can't remember, I haven't got it to hand what the percentage is, but it was an incredibly high number of people on the latest iOS update, or is it iOS 14 or whatever they brought out, the Ask App Not to Track. That's been a significant amount of people that had blocked that. And that kind of causes problems. Like if you're on social media now and you're trying to run an advertising campaign, there are limitations or more limitations coming in now than what we had previously, which obviously makes it a bit harder to target your advert to the right people. And that's only going to really get worse, I think, as these platforms have to stop tracking your information. So the demographic data that's available becomes harder. And then what you're really only relying on is what people kind of give you. And, people are getting savvy to that, right? And saying like, no, I'm not giving you all this, kind of fair enough, but it does also make it really difficult because you don't want to supply advertising to the wrong people because it's waste. but those people don't want to tell you who they are or what their likes are or things like that. So it makes it really hard to give the right advert to the right people. This is also apparent in the out-of-home space. Now, the out-of-home space has been around for a long, long time. I mean, Christ, we're going back to probably Victorian times, you know, where you've had posters and billboards and things like that. And the data tracking in out-of-home it has always been really, really lacking. And actually now it's pretty much surveys, guesswork, and assumptions. You know, if you have a billboard somewhere and you want to run some advertising on it, I mean, that's fine. They'll take your money and they'll put their poster up. But if you say to them, well, you know, what's your footfall? All they can really do is give you either some guesswork and assumptions, or they might have somebody who stood there with a clipboard for a day, ticking off how many people they've seen. And it really is kind of intelligent as that. You know, so all of this kind of essentially means we end up in this point where, you know, we still need targeted advertising, but it's becoming harder to do that. So how can we kind of get around it, I suppose? And that's where we're sort of coming in, you know, as a provider. So we've teamed up with a company in the States called AdMobilize. They are one of only, I think, 3 or 4 companies that are working specifically in the kind of out-of-home arena to provide an alternative way of getting demographic data. So we're working very closely with them on the development of their AI algorithms and on the software that they provide. And what it allows us to do is essentially, for a reasonably low cost, we can deploy sensors to all of our locations, and we can track demographic data from these sensors. Now I can just kind of show you very quickly if I stop sharing for a minute. I mean, it literally runs on a Raspberry Pi. So we've got one here. So Raspberry Pi, this is a free B+, and that's the minimum kind of spec. When I was talking to them, I was kind of asking them like, look, I need something that I can scale. And be cost effective. And the problem is some of the other solutions out there, their algorithm is really resource intensive, and really you've got to use quite a high spec PC. AdMobilize's system actually does just run on this quite happily. And then we work with a Logitech C270 webcam, like that's it. So literally the build is these 2 things. What that then allows us to do is, I can't remember how many things it's doing a second, but it's essentially using facial detection, and it's analyzing people on the fly. The feed never leaves the building, and from that we're able to get all of this data, and I'm going to show you some of that now. So if I just go here and share, I'm not going to share my Gmail because that would be really inappropriate. There we go. It's this one, I think. Cool. Can you see my Safari there? So this is one view. I'm going to show you ad space as well in a minute, and a more aggregated kind of view. This is the AdMobilize.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Sorry, Justin, we're looking at your desktop, not your Safari.
Okay. Let me try again. It was weird. It wasn't coming up as a... Oh, there we go. It's there now. Right. That better?
Thanks. Yes.
Cool. Okay, so this is the AdMobilize dashboard. This is one view that I use. And if I just show you like last month. So we didn't have all of our locations on board last month, but we still managed to get 188,000 impressions by the end of the month. What this view basically gives us is total impressions, total views, and the engagement rate, essentially. So what we're trying to do is not only record the data, but we want to prove that people are engaging with our network. So obviously when we're doing advertising, yeah, people want to know, you know, well, I mean, how many people are looking at my advert? Now we can obviously give them that, but we can also give them a broader kind of overview of our network engagement. What's really interesting is, like, you know, with standard static billboards and things, it's impossible to really know how many people have looked at it. As I say, you've got the guesswork, the assumptions, things like that, but it doesn't actually tell you how many people have really take a note of it. Whereas obviously we can do that. What I mean, if we look at sort of like some of the data we're getting in here, you know, this is measuring like, you know, gender. We get sentiment as well, so positive, neutral, negative. I don't want to dwell too much on that because I'm actually going to show you a better view of this stuff in a minute. But it is quite useful. It kind of shows me, you know, detections by gender, attention time by gender, impressions and views by times of day. What's really handy with this is, you know, I get kind of a high level here, so I can just look at any point over even this month. You know, if we go here and just look, it's only been 3 days and we've already had, you know, 17,000 impressions. We're still, you know, broadly 3/4 of the people actually looking at the screens. Most people are sort of fairly indifferent. We have some positive and some negative. But this, I mean, this is really powerful. This is great, this stuff, you know, I mean, this is really good. And I can look down at specific locations as well. So I could say like, you know, Eastbourne Borough Football Club over the last 3 days has had 493 impressions, for example. So it gives me the ability to go down to the individual sort of unit. If we go into AdSpace, so this is the platform that I actually engineered. I've got some different reports in here, and what this does is essentially aggregates the data. So we've got 3 main kind of audience reporting. We've got traffic summary, distribution, and demographic. So if we go to summary, first of all, and then if we pick, I don't know, our last 7 days, group by day, and then let's look at Eastbourne Borough Football Club. So what we can see is essentially, you know, which day was busiest, you know, in the last 7 days. So 31st, I think, was Sunday. That would have been a match day because they had a football match playing, right? So we can clearly see that when it's a match day, how much busier it is. And we can look at that, you know, over the last sort of 3 months. This is obviously before we have the sensor in. We can see, you know, match days are pretty obvious. So from there, you know, when we're looking at, well, when's the best time to sort of place ads, you'll get the most impact if we place them when match days are on, right? Because that's when the most people are kind of coming in. If we look at a different one like Coffee Republic,
Sorry, Justin, I'm just wondering if the image didn't update.
Sorry, that's my fault. It's my fault.
You switched, and I don't think it updated.
Yeah, let's try this. Can we see it now?
There we go. Yes.
There we are. This is me being an idiot. I was sharing the wrong screen. Let's go back to Eastbourne Borough Football Club. So yeah, as I say, in the last 7 days, that was the view here. So we got the match day there where it's quite obviously busier than the rest of the time. If we go to the last 3 months, again, we can see the match days as the peak kind of times when the venue's busiest. Then if we go and look at like Coffee Republic, totally different type of business. I mean, they're pretty much busy all the time. So like if we were looking at ad placement, you know, Eastbourne Borough Football Club, we probably want to be a bit more laser focused with when we're deploying advertising. With Coffee Republic, it's like, just run it whenever, because you know you're going to get loads of people looking at it. So the traffic summary, this is, you know, really great. And this is one of the advantages of this over static out of home or other digital out of home providers, where it's like, you know, well, when is the busiest times to kind of place it? You don't have a choice with a billboard. It goes up and that's it, you know, and you're only really going to have the data at given points in time because it's not real time. You know, we're able to provide this really in real time. It's, I mean, the platform updates within a few seconds of getting an impression. And then we can view that data in here almost immediately. So this is traffic summary. So this is really useful. The other thing we then look at is distribution. So what we can look at here, if we said, again, Coffee Republic over the last 3 months, this gives us an aggregated view of the data as a cross section during a day. So again, it's over the last 3 months, it's been aggregated. And what we can look at here is say, okay, well, clearly the busiest time of day at Coffee Republic is in the sort of midday, lunchtime, you know, and it's just really apparent. But again, if we then think back to the summary, I mean, they are fairly consistently busy all day, but they do have peak times. If we looked at Eastbourne Borough Football Club, incidentally, both of these are in Eastbourne. Coffee Republic's in Eastbourne, and then Eastbourne Borough Football Club. If we look at their one, it's a totally different view. You know, they have a little bit of peaks in the afternoon, but generally they're busier in the evenings. So again, it's a totally different venue and a totally different location. But what it allows us to do is build our campaigns to run only at the kind of peak times where they're going to get the maximum impact. And again, this is just something that, you know, out of home can't do at all. And digital out of home, unless they've got this kind of technology, you know, they're just not going to be able to sort of provide this, I suppose. Online, you know, I guess you can, but then, you know, what we're now able to provide, but I know online can't, is the sentiment, really. I mean, online, unless you're asking somebody, how was your experience? And most people don't do that. You haven't got a clue how they're reacting. Whereas we can actually look at this stuff. Now, what's really cool, if we go to Coffee Republic first, so over the last 3 months, you've got a fairly even split of male, female, mostly very young people, 18 to 24, 25 to 34. That makes up the vast majority. And mostly they're kind of happy or neutral. We do have 26% of people are sad, 2.79 are angry. We've got some disgusted people in there and some scared people. This is awesome. And this is one of the things that sets AdMobilize apart, really, is the sentiment tracking. And what's really interesting with it is that when we're running a campaign, we can give that sentiment value back to the advertiser. So if they're running like, I'll give you a great one, the RNLI, we were running their Float to Live campaign, and it is terrifying. It's basically a video of someone drowning, which is pretty intense. We did have a noticeable uptick in the fear response or the fear sentiment across the network when that campaign was running. And that's actually reducing a bit now because the campaign stopped. So it's really cool being able to kind of see that sort of stuff. What's interesting, if we look at Eastbourne Borough Football Club, which again is a totally different demographic, most of them are men, very few women go into this place, and they're actually a lot older. So the 18 to 24 is very small, big chunk of 25 to 34, 35 to 44, and then you're obviously getting older. Quite a lot of them are angry. So what this is essentially saying is that the people that go to Eastbourne Borough Football Club are angry old men. Which, when I say that to people who live in Eastbourne, they kind of think, yeah, that's probably about right. So that's really cool. You know, and actually quite a lot of them are sad. So I don't know if that's a reflection on Eastbourne Borough's performance in the leagues, but, you know, they have quite a broad 50%, I'd say, negative sentiment in their location. What I found also quite interesting is like gyms. You know, if you look at Hove Fitness, so again, it's slightly heavier on the male side. Again, much younger demographic, you know, 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44 is kind of makes up their things. They have actually quite a decent sort of positive sentiment. One of my other gyms, I think it was Lanes maybe, you have a look at that one. I could be wrong. And maybe that's changed recently actually, but one of them, they actually had quite a lot of sad people. No, there's a change recently, so they must have made some changes. But it looked like quite a lot of people that were going there were quite sort of upset or not particularly happy, and I kind of agreed with them because, you know, whenever I go to the gym, I'm usually feeling quite sad and depressed that I'm about to go and, you know, exert myself and put myself through the pain. But it's just, you know, this is just really interesting. I mean, like, you know, Lanes actually, they again have a very similar demographic to Hove Fitness. So if we were looking at gender and age, we have very close similarities. And actually the emotion demographics fairly similar now as well. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what we're doing with it. I'm just gonna stop sharing that and just quickly talk about what we're doing in the future. And then I think that's enough of me waffling at people. So let me just try and share the right thing this time. Keynote, there we go. Right, so we've demoed the things. So yeah, where we're going in the future. So yeah, this stuff we're using now is cool. You know, I mean, it's really cool. Whether you agree or not, I don't care. I think it's great. I hope you think it's pretty cool as well. But it's still limited. You know, there's more that we can do with it, and there's more that we want to do with it. And the first one really is dynamic ad placement. Now, again, there is one company that's doing that at the moment. I don't know if they're doing it in the UK yet. I think they were trialing it. What that essentially means we're going to do is we're going to link the Raspberry Pi player to the Raspberry Pi sensor. We're going to link to our players, our signage players. And the technology is already there to do it. It's just getting development time to actually do the integration. But essentially, there's a Rabbit MQ socket exposed actually between both. And it's just a case of listening to events coming from the sensor. But the idea is that when somebody is standing looking at one of our screens, the sensor is going to say to the player, there's this person looking at it, right? So they're approximately this age, they are this gender, they're currently pissed, you know, or they're happy, or whatever their current sentiment is at that point. And then what we can do on the ad space side of things and on, you know, with our Blue Billboard network is essentially go, grand, let's show them this advert because it's the most appropriate to this person. Now that is a bit Minority Report. The difference though is that obviously in Minority Report, they knew who the person was. We don't know who they are because we're only using facial detection, not recognition. So we will never be that advanced because I'm not keen on capturing actual people's information. But what it's allowing us to do is still deliver a targeted advert to somebody. Now, it's not perfect because it's not down to the person. We don't know their likes, their hobbies, or whatever. Yes, there are limitations there, but you can get broadly accurate with the demographic to make sure that they're seeing something appropriate. The example I always use is, Gillette. So we're running a campaign for Gillette. Man is looking at the screen, man gets a Gillette advert. Woman's looking at the screen, she gets a Venus advert. You know, it's basically stuff like that, right? Obviously, the AI, we're working quite closely with AdMobilize to continually improve their AI. They recently added something for mask detection. Well, that was about 6 months ago now, which we've had running, which has been really cool. So it's where people are wearing face masks. It's still, it takes that into account and can still make a judgment. It's obviously not as accurate, but it's still something. And that will continually improve as time goes on. The other thing we're looking at is programmatic Do. So Do is the industry that I'm in, that's digital out of home. Programmatic is something that's really underrepresented at the moment, and rightfully so, because to be honest, it's an absolute state of affairs, because there's all these different companies all doing different things and nobody's really standardized it yet. I mean, there is a standardization now called VAST, V-A-S-T, which we actually use on AdSpace and in Blue Billboard. We just need more of the industry to move to that. But essentially, programmatic Do means that media buyers and agencies and companies like that, they don't have to talk to us. They can just go to these central platforms. They can look at the data that we're capturing, and they can order and buy advertising space directly on a number of networks, ours included. And those adverts will just programmatically come through without us having to speak to anybody. And we'll just get a check at the end of each month for whatever time they're bought. So that's something that's coming now, actually. We're already in the process of getting onboarded onto Adomni. Adomni manage all of the digital out of home for Uber in the US. So if you ever see Uber cars driving around with screens on the roofs, that's managed by Adomni. And we're going to be on that platform as well. And then the last thing is mobile. I think you will, again, hopefully quite like this. So what we're planning on doing is basically putting signage, digital signage on the back of vehicles. So HGVs, buses, vans, things like that. We already have a couple of fleets that have said they'll agree to work with us. The biggest problem actually is just trying to source the stuff. And I'm still scratching my head at the moment about how I'm actually going to technically deliver that. I've got some ideas, but it's tricky, I've got to kind of work it out. But legally, we are able to do it as long as it's static. We can't use video, but what we will then be able to do is obviously, we can have geofence campaigns. So we can say, okay, well, we'll draw a geofence around Brighton Hove. Any static inventory in that location will show the advert, and then any vans, lorries, whatever that drive into that geofence will also start displaying that advert as well. And the AI sensor that we're using, it also has a vehicle detection algorithm as well as facial detection. So we can basically on the vehicles have vehicle detection running, and we can essentially provide similar demographic data, but on a specific kind of geofence or route rather than the static that we have now. So that's kind of where we're going in the future. And I think that's probably it. So questions and or hurling abuse at me. I'm fairly thick-skinned, so that's fine. You know, talk about privacy or whatever. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you very much for this, Justin. Thank you. I learned a lot here, and I can imagine. So I can imagine, you know, you hinted at this yourself. You know, that there's sort of two aspects here in your presentation. There's the technical aspect, and then there's sort of the societal aspects of it. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. And I mean, I've been looking at the chat. There are plenty of questions already out there. But I was wondering if we could sort of focus a little bit on technology and the data side of it and the AI side of it first, because I think the other one is going to be a little more time consuming.
Yeah.
So just to make a little space for that, I wondered if you do any validation on the models that do the so as I understand it, you have the whole tech stack inside a Raspberry Pi and a webcam, and the Raspberry Pi runs the computer vision model that does demographics, and it from the facial detection, it can tell affect or emotion, sentiment, gaze control, gaze detection, and it does a gender classification and an age group classification.
Yes.
Do you run any data validation on that?
So yes and no. Generally, because we're licensing the software from the company, we give them a degree of assumption that the models are accurate. But we have tested this, and you know, we've done our own kind of. We can actually test how the algorithm is working by standing in front of it, and actually there's like an admin side where I can take an image preview. Jeremy's actually seen it in action. It wasn't particularly forgiving on that one. I have to apologize to your wife again for what it gave. Broadly, it's been fairly accurate. I mean, it always adds 5 to 10 years to my age, which obviously infuriates me no end. But yeah, sorry, Jerry. But lots of other people, particularly ladies in general, it tends to underestimate by about 5 to 10 years, which of course they're always very happy with when they see it. Broadly though, it's pretty spot on with gender. I mean, gender is almost, you know, spot on all the time. Age is, I guess, within 5 to 10 years of accuracy. That will get better as time goes on and as the, you know, algorithm learns. But you know, at the moment it's about that sort of area. In terms of emotion, that again is new. You know, I mean, that's a new thing, sentiment. It definitely works, and I can tell you that for sure, because when I installed one, the first one I installed, I was standing looking at it and literally cursing it because I couldn't get the thing to connect to the Wi-Fi. So I was just throwing abuse at this thing. And when it eventually connected, it actually recorded some impressions. And when I looked, they were all negative and they were all me swearing at it. So yeah, I mean, I think you've got to be fairly obvious with it. The subtleties are hard for it to detect at the moment. But again, that will change as time goes on.
But from what I'm hearing is the only way to test it is to go in front of it. It's not as if it's actually capturing video and taking snapshot and images and saving images of people, identifiable. Okay.
No, and we're not allowed to do that because otherwise we'd be breaching GDPR, you know, so the feed never leaves the building, you know, where the sensor is located. And essentially how it works is the feed is coming in from the camera. The analysis is happening using the vision engine in real time. So as the feed's in, the detection is happening in real time. That data is then just stored as JSON and sent back up to the server, but the feed's gone. You know, I mean, it's gone. That's it. The only time I can, yeah, as I say, when I can evaluate or test it is by asking for a screenshot, but it's still not a feed. It's just literally what can it see at that moment in time, and that's it. And again, there's messages all over the place about GDPR. We don't store any of that for obvious reasons. So,
all right. Thank you for clarifying those two. I used my prerogative to ask the first questions. There are tons of questions in the chat, and I'll get to them. But first, I wanted to ask if there's anybody on the call right now who wants to speak up and make a question, please, rather than a comment. Otherwise, I'll just read off the chat here what we've already collected.
Yeah, I was going to say there are many things in that. I'm just trying to.
There are many things here.
People of different races is the most recent one. That's quite a good one, actually. We don't do, yeah. So cheers for that, Ash. Yeah, we don't have race detection. That's not something that we have in the system at the moment. It basically doesn't care, man or woman, and age. We're not looking at authenticity.
And I have,
you know, to me,
do you know?
I don't like the idea of detecting race personally, because I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I know,
but aside from detecting the race or classifying by ethnicity, what about the accuracy of the model for the various ethnicities?
Yeah, well, that was more my question, actually, because I didn't see that you were collecting.
From what we've seen, there's no difference. Like it's the accuracy is pretty similar. The guys that, you know, when we've spoken and worked with them on the AI, I mean, they have quite a few customers in the US, and obviously race is very, you know, much more obvious over there than it is here, in terms of, like, you know, people being aware of it and whatever, and they cater for that. You know, I think they pretty much cover, you know, Asian, black, white. You know, I think they're pretty much, you know, it works around that, you know, and it's still able to tell if it's a man or a woman and how old. Yeah. I guess one of the questions, I don't know if there was a question in here around it, but actually transgender was one that somebody asked about at another call. Obviously that, the thing is that one of the things it's looking at is bone structure and facial structure. And that's quite difficult, you know, to really work, you know, to say whether, how do you classify somebody, you know, really, I think there needs to be a kind of point where you say, look, we can only go with what we've got in front of us. You know, it's really hard to say, like, you know, yeah, as you said there, actually, about long hair and stuff. Would it, I mean, you know, you've got longer hair. Would it make you think you're a woman, for example? I mean, I don't know is the answer. I mean, you know, that isn't, we get this kind of unknown category, but, you know, a small percentage drop into. Maybe we would see an increase in that where it's not able to determine it. Equally, it's kind of, you know, could people complain to us because, you know, maybe they're trans and it's detected them as not the gender that they want to identify as? Maybe, but, you know, the data's anonymous anyway. It's only about broad demographics, and we're not going to have everybody identifying as one gender or the other. It's only ever a smallish percentage. It's not going to be enough, I don't think, that would impact a broader demographic of a location. You know, and that's what we're interested in delivering. Where it may get difficult is when we're doing the dynamic ad placement. And that's something that we will have to look at that point.
There's a question here in the chat. What exactly do you define as an impression?
So the industry defines the impression as they have been given the opportunity to see an advert, if we're talking about it in the do advertising sense. The way we look at it is that the camera has detected somebody within its field of view, and then a view is where they've actually looked and engaged with the screen. So if you remember that first dashboard I was showing you where we had impressions, views, and gaze rate, that's essentially that. So an impression is a person was in the vicinity of the camera. And then the view is they the detection has seen the eyes looking at the screen, because the cameras are all on top of screens, right? So that's why we do it like that. I mean, you could cheat it and put the camera somewhere else, but for us, all of our cameras are on all of the screens, right? So when we tell you it's a view, it is a view, you know, they have seen it. The impressions, yeah, I mean, they've been given the opportunity to look at it, but haven't necessarily actually engaged with it. But, you know, when I can look at my overall network and say, look, we've got an overall engagement rate of over 75%, you can make a pretty good assumption that if I said you've had 250,000 impressions, 75% of those would have been views, you know? I hope that answers that, or was that just complete fiction?
Andrew says yes. Okay, good.
Cool.
Thank you. There's a question here. How did you get the gender data? But we covered that. That's from your model. Yes. Maybe we'll dig in a little bit deeper and ask. So the provider of that model, do they tell you anything about how that model is trained, what it is based on? Because obviously we know of models out in the wild that have that are actually in use and have biases and stuff like that, and you know, problematic models are out there. So do you know anything about the model?
Not enough from that I could give you a technical answer, unfortunately. But I would recommend you talk to them if you want to know more about it, because what they're doing is really cool. They're fairly open about how they work with it and how they train it. So you know, if you want to know more on the technical side, then reach out to Admobilize. For sure.
Thank you. Yeah. And then
I would say that I built it myself, but to be perfectly frank, I don't have the time to learn you know, Rust or other AI kind of stuff. It's been on my backlog for ages and ages, along with AR. You know, augmented reality is something that I really want to get into as well, and I've kind of dabbled a bit with it, but you know, I just don't know. I'm not time rich. That's the problem. So, you know, engineering, I have to just focus on what I know most of the time, you know.
So another question here is about the analytics platform. Yeah, you get some praise on that. It looks great. Is that something that you had to work on a lot, or is it just out of the box from Admobilize? So
the first one was Admobilize's platform. So that gives you kind of a more high level. The second one I showed you was AdSpace, where it's more aggregated. And that's the thing that I actually engineered there. So there's quite a lot of MongoDB aggregation going on, you know, and you know, we kind of, like, you could ask, I mean, actually I can share, I'll show you an example whilst we're here just for a second. If I just share again very briefly. So this is the platform that I built. So these are the campaigns that are running at the moment. If we go to like Float to Live, for example, and then go to Proof of Play. So on this campaign, you can see that we had 23,722 plays, which consumed 438,418 seconds. And that got 251,901 impressions. You can also see here where there was quite a marked increase, and that's basically where we enabled to load more of the AI sensors. So prior to that, it was mostly just guesswork. And then as we added more sensors, you can see the increase: 30, 30, 38, 40, 49, 54. This isn't necessarily that we're getting busier. This is literally we're adding more locations online. So what I've done here, so the way, yeah, I mean, Proof of Play is a great one actually, because, you know, how do you actually know that the thing played? You know, I could just be saying, yeah, it's been playing loads. Where's the evidence? Well, because it's digital, the CMS or the player software records everything that gets played out on the screen. So what happens with the adverts is exactly the same thing. A Proof of Play record gets created that is essentially evidence that the advert played. What we then do behind the scenes is that data is all stored in Mongo. We then run essentially a comparison query. So we've got a feed coming in from Admobilize where the data from the AI sensors is being added into our Mongo database. And we're essentially doing comparisons at the times of the proof of play for the adverts against the impressions that were made in from AdMobilize. And from that, we can then say, these are the people that saw that advert because it was done at that same time. I mean, is it 100%? Probably not, but it's going to be in the high 90s in terms of the accuracy of that. So yeah, that's basically it. So it's quite good. We're about to add the gender breakdown and age breakdown into here as well, and also sentiment, because at the moment we're just showing male, female, and unknown. We have got the data already in the object that's coming back to populate this table. We just haven't shown it yet, so that's coming up soon. So we'll actually, on a campaign level, we'll be able to give that sentiment reaction, you know, directly from here. So yeah, so that's how we do that in AdSpace.
Okay, wait, sorry. I'm going to skip over a couple of football-related questions and comments. And there's another one on how the sentiment and gender data is generated, and it's not facial recognition, but facial detection.
And there's that's the real key difference, is that, you know, that if it was facial recognition, I mean, we'd be being absolutely slaughtered right now by privacy groups and everyone else. And actually, you know, I do still get people that kind of give me that winced, cringy look when I tell them the sort of level of data that we can provide. And, you know, and I mean, the thing is that I'm a big supporter of privacy. I mean, I'm one of those that says no, you know, and actually, I mean, I use a Mac, you know, and I don't even have to think about it generally. I mean, Safari, the minute I open a tab, I can accept all the cookies in the world. The minute I close that tab, they're gone, you know, and the same on iOS, right? So I don't even really think about it, but I don't tick boxes. I don't let people contact me. I don't do any of that stuff, right? And I still get crap through the post and phone, whatever. But the thing is, you know, I'm really, you know, in favor of online privacy. The thing is with this is that it's still private because we don't know who the people are. We don't recognize them. That can cause duplicate impressions. I mean, you may be sitting there thinking like, well, if you don't know who they are, if one person looked 5 times at the screen, that's going to record it 5 times. Yeah, it is. Again, it's about broad kind of, you know, demographic there. And actually multiple impressions isn't a bad thing. I mean, I can be sat in my barber's chair, and you may think this is amazing that I see a barber, but I do. I like to be groomed, you know. And when I'm sat in my barber's chair on a Saturday morning, of course, they have one of my screens, and I'm looking at it in the mirror in the chair, and I'm getting impressions probably 4 or 5 times per advert. You know, in the time that I'm sat there, you know, the dwell time in a barber's what, 15 minutes to half an hour on average. You know, you're probably going to get hit 5 or 6 times by the same advert. That's not a problem. I mean, that's great. You know, you want to hit people multiple times to get the message right. Thinking about it from an advertising perspective, you know.
And speaking of the advertiser perspective, there's a question here from Alex. Do you give what information do you give back to the advertiser, to the businesses, your clients? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So at the moment, we have the proof of play report. We essentially give them that, really, kind of grouped, summarized. That's kind of post-campaign, I guess. So once, or even while the campaign is running, you know, I'll give them running updates on that, because I mean, this is updating in real time. I say real time, I mean within about 10 minutes of an ad play, the data is here. You know, so it is fairly close to real time. So I can give them the running data. Obviously, very soon we're going to be able to share the sentiment as well as the age breakdowns as well in this proof of play report that I shared earlier. Prior to the campaign, really, we kind of talked to them about what are the objectives. You know, who are they wanting to kind of target? How much money have they got? You know, if they haven't got a lot of money, we try and be much more targeted for them or even more targeted for them in terms of placement, just to really try and make sure they get the most bang for their buck. You know, I don't like ripping people off. So if someone says like, you know, oh, I've only got 100 quid, well, I'm not going to run that for a week all day long, because it's just going to suck up budget and not actually do anything. Whereas I can really laser focus the the times of day. So they're getting, even if it only plays for half an hour or an hour at a time, they're getting it at the, you know, the busiest times. So we're quite transparent about that. You know, we'll generally be on like a Zoom call or something, and we'll share, you know, the data from the different locations. And certainly, you know, we won't sell the whole network. I mean, if there's a location where they want more women than men, I'm obviously not going to give them Eastbourne Borough Football Club as an example, because it's 75% male or more, right? So, you know, we do a lot of that. What we also do with the data is we do share it with the locations as well, because I'll tell you what, most of these businesses haven't got a Scooby-Doo who goes into their company. You know, all they have is a take, right? Like, you know, oh, we made this much today, and we've made this much this week. Brilliant. Who are your customers? This is exactly the problem that I had when I was trying to put some of these screens out and trying to assess the suitability. And it's like, well, what's your footfall? I don't know. Okay, cool. How many men, how many women, like, you know, how many, you know, what are the ages? No idea. They literally don't have a clue. Whereas now I can give them that, and I do give them that if they want it. I mean, some of them couldn't care less, but you know, there are some of the businesses that every month I send them some extracts of the data from here exported, and they're using that to make, essentially to make us, you know, business decisions in terms of staffing levels and things like that. Yeah. Which is great. I mean, it's another thing that we're helping them with, you know.
Yeah, you sort of hit on the two poles that pull in on me, and the first one is, you know, like yourself, I try to be privacy aware. I try to keep my privacy, course, but at the same time, I love datafication. I love the gains we get in understanding when we have you know, real world mapped into a data you know, a data frame. Yeah. So yeah, so you beautifully encapsulated both of those poles.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, Oscar? Is like, you know, as I said in one of my slides about targeted advertising. I mean, it is needed. That's the thing. Like, if you don't do it, it's. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily, but it's waste. But if you think like, where you used to be able to spend, say, £5 on advertising, you'd get maybe £4 worth of decent exposure from that. You know, that number's changing. You may still only spend £5, but now you're only getting maybe a couple of grand's worth of good exposure. You know, and that's just with the changes that are coming. That's not gonna get any better, you know, as privacy continues to lock things down. So, you know, what we're trying to really offer is, it's still a way for businesses to get good exposure, you know, good impressions, and they're actual people, they're not bots, you know.
So to all, I had a conversation with Justin before, and he has a parent evening, so this will be a last question. There's one question left at the chat.
I was going to say, I can give you another 5 or 10 minutes, and then.
Yeah. But if anybody here wants to speak up and pose a question directly, that gets precedence. So if anybody wants to, here's your opportunity. It's not going to last very long. When somebody wants to walk in here, then you're welcome to. Okay, fine. Oh wait, that's Andrew. Andrew, please. Thank you.
Yeah, well, always. Hi, Justin. I thought it was really great, fascinating.
Sure.
My question is, right, so as you said earlier, you know, for instance, in the football club, you know, a lot of angry looking old men.
Yes.
You know, figures, yeah. So you want to see what effect the ad's having on. Do you have any baseline effects, so that, you know, baseline data, so that, you know that it's the angry old men are sort of this level percentage. Yeah. When you show the ad, they're up or down. So you could perhaps say that the ad's having some effect. Have you ever, can you do that? Have you tried that?
Yes and no. So AdSpace kind of lets us do that, because we've got the aggregated view, right? That was the thing I showed you earlier with the pie charts. So the aggregated view, that isn't campaign specific, right? So that's just general. And obviously, when the campaigns are running, it's still measuring that as a general thing. It just, we can also then link it to a campaign proof of play as well, if you see what I mean. So the main data set is always that. It's just being fed into, and that's what the aggregation is done on. But yeah, when it comes to a campaign, what we can then do is actually look at the sentiment at the time that the ad played to then get a measurement from that. And then obviously as time goes on, we will have more data to work on. I mean, to be fair, we've only had this stuff out in the wild. I think the oldest one is about 2.5 months old.
Right.
This is all new. I mean, I'll come back in a year's time and I can show you even more.
Like, please do. I mean, I think this is really fascinating. It's got a lot of applications. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. Cheers.
Justin, we will call you in on that.
I mean, mate, I'd be more than happy to do that. Definitely. Yeah, no, I'd really be happy to come back in a year. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, as you know, you guys all love data and you work with data. I mean, we've only got a few months worth of data here, and some of them are only a couple of weeks old. You know, where we've finally got every location. I mean, every Blue Billboard location now has one of these sensors, and every location going forward will have one out by default. I mean, I've got another 5 or 6 Raspberry Pis sitting on the shelf over here, ready to go out to my next kind of deployments. You know, data grows, you know, and the more you have, the more you can play around with it, right? And I'm sure Jeremy will want to get his, filthy hands all over my data at some point in the future. Yeah, I mean, I know other people will as well, I'm sure. You know, I mean, we're actually looking at the potential of monetizing some of this. You know, perhaps to the Office of National Statistics and people like that, local councils, basically sort of like, do you want to know what the average kind of engagement or footfall is at a gym in your locality? Yeah, that'd be great. Cool. Here you go. You know, and I mean, that's the sort of thing, when, we're hoping we'll be nationwide within the next 5 years. I mean, almost every conurbation in the country, I'd be able to give you data on, and I mean, that's immensely powerful. So yeah, I mean, give us a year, we'll have a load more. I'll come back in 5 years' time, and hopefully we'll either be bankrupt or we'll be, printing 50s is my hope. But anyway.
Yeah, well, you've answered so many questions. You've shared so much of your company's working, your business. That
I did have one more thing, Oscar. Sorry, but I saw Kieran.
Oh, please.
Kieran asked a question about A and B testing, which was really interesting. We don't have the facility in ad space at the moment to facilitate that on a singular campaign. What we can do though is we can run 2 variants of the same or let's say 2 different creatives on the same campaign. We can do that now. There is a item in the backlog to actually record the proof of play specific to the creative. We just don't have that at the moment. But yeah, eventually we'll be able to do multivariate testing as well with sentiment. But I just thought it was worth answering that, because actually that is something that we were discussing on the ad space side recently about bringing in. So we will have that eventually.